Hi, my name is Mr. Peck from Ideas Inc. School, and today we will be discussing about movement of substances. The three main processes are diffusion, osmosis, and active transport. We will be focusing on diffusion and osmosis first. Diffusion is the net movement of substances from a region of higher to lower concentrations. This movement occurs down a concentration gradient and is a passive process, meaning no energy is required. Examples of diffusion include gaseous exchange that occurs in the lungs and carbon dioxide diffusing into the leaves for photosynthesis. Next is osmosis. Osmosis is the net movement of water molecules from a region of higher to lower water potential across a partially permeable membrane. This movement also occurs down a concentration gradient and is a passive process, meaning no energy is required. An example of osmosis is how water enters the roots from the soil. Next, we will be discussing about the factors that help to increase the rate of diffusion and osmosis. The first factor is temperature. The higher the temperature, the higher the kinetic energy that the particles possess. This increases the frequency of effective collisions, thus increasing the rate of diffusion and osmosis. The second factor is the size of the particle and its surface area to volume ratio. The smaller the particle, the larger its surface area to volume ratio. This will increase the frequency of effective collisions, thus increasing the rate of diffusion and osmosis. The third factor is the steepness of concentration gradient. The greater the difference in concentration between two regions, the steeper the gradient. And the steeper the gradient, the faster the rate of diffusion and osmosis. The last factor is diffusion distance. The shorter the diffusion distance between two regions, the faster the rate of diffusion and osmosis. Now we will discuss about the third method of movement known as active transport. Active transport is the movement of substances from a region of lower to higher concentration. As a result, particles move up a concentration gradient, and this will require energy. Active transport only occurs in living cells as they contain mitochondria. Mitochondria is the organelle of the cell that respires to release the energy required for active transport. An example of active transport involves the root hair cells. The root hair cells contain a lot of mitochondria so that they can release enough energy to absorb mineral salts from the soil. On to the main part of this chapter, we will be discussing about how plant and animal cells react when they are placed into two different types of solution. One solution is a dilute salt solution which has a higher water potential than the cells. We call this a hypotonic solution. The other solution is a concentrated salt solution which has a lower water potential than the cells. We call this a hypotonic solution instead. Let's talk about the behavior of plant cells first. When a plant cell is placed into a dilute salt solution, since the salt solution has a higher water potential than the cell, water will move into the cell by osmosis. This movement occurs down the concentration gradient and across the partially permeable membrane. As a result, the plant cell becomes turgid, its mass increases, it becomes elongated and bulges. However, the plant cell does not burst. This is because the rigid cellulose cell wall exerts an equal and opposing force to the turgor pressure generated by the expanding cytoplasm. Next, we will talk about what happens in a concentrated salt solution. When a plant cell is placed into a concentrated salt solution, since the salt solution has a lower water potential than the cell, water will move out of the cell into the solution instead. This movement occurs down the concentration gradient and across the partially permeable membrane. As a result, the plant becomes flaccid, its mass decreases, it shrinks in size, and plasmolysis occurs. Plasmolysis happens because the cytoplasm is shrinking. This causes the cell membrane to pull away from the cell wall, making it visible. When plasmolysis occurs, the salt solution will enter into the gaps between the cell wall and the cell membrane. This is because the cell wall is fully permeable and will not stop this movement from occurring. Now we will be discussing about the outcome of animal cells if they are subjected to the same types of solutions. When an animal cell is placed into a dilute salt solution, since the salt solution has a higher water potential than the cell, water will move into the cell by osmosis. This movement occurs down the concentration gradient and across the partially permeable membrane. As a result, the animal cell lyses or bursts. This is because the animal cell lacks a rigid cell wall to oppose the expanding cytoplasm. On the other hand, when an animal cell is placed into a concentrated salt solution, since the salt solution has a lower water potential than the cell, water will move out of the cell into the solution instead. This movement occurs down the concentration gradient and across the partially permeable membrane. As a result, the animal cell shrinks, spikes will appear, and the cell crenates. Last but not least, we will be talking about dynamic equilibrium. Let's recall why diffusion and osmosis occur in the first place. These processes occur because there was an initial difference in concentration between two regions. However, once the regions become homogeneous, meaning they have uniform concentrations, does that mean no more movement of substances occur? The answer is no. When both regions have equal concentrations, we call these regions isotonic. When that happens, no more net movement of particles occur. The key phrase is no more net movement. That does not mean no movement occurs. Particles will not stop moving as according to particle theory. All particles are always in constant random motion. Thus, what dynamic equilibrium means is that there will not be a major movement of substances from one region to the other. All movement henceforth will be subtle one-to-one exchanges. We have come to the end of this chapter. If you have further questions, please approach Mr. Peck. Thank you for listening and have a nice day.